Well, hello. Thanks for joining us for yet another edition of Make Heaven Crowded podcast here at Team FBC. We are the three senior pastors, Pastor Roger, Pastor Luke, Pastor Jordan, where we talk a little bit about what happened on Sunday, what we talked about on Sunday, but also doing a deep dive on culture, on the world, and kind of what's going on around us through the lens of what we spoke on the previous Sunday. And this Sunday was a topic that when we decided this series, I said, I will do any week except this week. And thankfully, I covered Mormon Jesus, which means that you were left with the Muslim view of Jesus. So
yeah, that's right.
Give us, like, as you were preparing for this, I'm guessing it was not the easiest message you've ever prepped.
No, so over the past month, knowing this message was coming up, probably the most time spent studying and preparing for a message, just because I had to learn about a whole nother religion. And honestly, going into it, did not know much about Islam. Approaching it, but it was a lot of fun because I did get to learn a lot as we got to dive in.
And that can be kind of tough because you've heard things about a certain religion, and you have to set aside all these pre-understandings or whatever you want to call it, and really look at it from a neutral standpoint and start from scratch and
That's
fresh.
the hard part,
So
because that's
hard.
why Mormon Jesus for me was so easy. Because if someone says, "Oh, well, you're just making a straw man argument. You're taking it out of context." Well, no, like I was a Mormon. You have never been a Muslim, so like for you really are trying to learn as much as you can, because in Bible college, and of course you went through Bible college, I went through Bible college. You've taken hermeneutics, and like in that we don't talk a lot about Islam. This is the one where I kind of felt unequipped, and so I'm glad again that you were able to pick that up.
Yeah, no, it was the part that they can't argue on is who Muslims believe Jesus is. And so that's why the majority of the message was talking about, well, who do Muslims say that I am? The part where it gets controversial is where we start talking about culture and their cultural impact upon things right now. And I touched on that a little bit, but the majority of the message was not on that at all.
And when you say culture, do you mean what they believe and how that affects culture?
Yeah, so we dabbled into it a little bit when talking about Mamdani and different things like that, and how that's affecting us now in America, and what we need to be aware of. But I think the part that they can't argue with is number one, why is this important for us to understand as Christians, especially even here in Missouri in the Bible Belt? But number two, who do Muslims say that Jesus is, and why is this different than the Jesus we believe from Scripture? And so most of the message focused on those two things. There was a little bit where we talked about culture, which is probably where we're going to go in the second half of this podcast about it. But the hardest part of the message was I was approaching it of, okay, why is this important for us in Lebanon, Missouri, in the middle of Bible Belt America? Because how many friends do you have that are Muslims?
Zero.
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah.
That I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's interesting, before you get into it, because I do want to say this. So I was reading William Lane Craig, who's my favorite apologist. He writes extensively on Islam and Christianity, and he writes that Christians are more unequipped with Islam because what context do most Christians learn about other religions? It's in the context of missions. And so when you went to India, I'm guessing there was a crash course of, hey, this is what people in India believe. This is Hinduism.
Yep.
If I'm going to Utah for a mission trip, I'm going to learn about Mormonism. Yeah. William Lane Craig says the difference is Christians will get knowledgeable on different religions that they're going to visit. We can't visit most parts of this Islamic world. And so we have a lot of Christians that aren't learning it because we don't have the opportunity to actually go and share the gospel of Jesus Christ, because it is a death sentence in, different parts of the Middle East to go and to share this stuff. So going into this, as you said, we don't know Muslims. We don't know a lot of Muslims. I think I jokingly said I've met 4 in my life.
Yeah.
2 of them were exchange students. And so like I haven't met a lot of Muslims in my life. But also, what incentive do we have if we can't go and share in Islamic countries, and if we don't know Muslims in our own circle? Here's the tension. Why does it matter that I know this stuff?
Yeah, and I think that's a good tension to be in. And you brought up India. I got a reference in the second service. I want to apologize because I made a mistake, a slip of the tongue. I meant to say that Hinduism is the number one religion in India. I accidentally said Islam. I just got caught up.
I'm sure so many people were just upset.
It surprised me. I had multiple people come up to me and say, "Hey, I think your professor," because I said it. My professor, Prosperly Lingdo, he was from India. And when he left Hindu and became a Christian, he literally had to abandon his entire family.
Yep.
And they disowned him and all this different stuff.
Kick you out,
and
everything.
Every day at class, he would ring the bell about, hey, pray for my family, pray for those in India. And leaving Hinduism and going into Christianity, those that are doing that. So sorry for the slip of the tongue. I
was mad.
can't believe it.
I was appalled.
I wrote a letter to the editor, the Lebanon Daily, or whatever it's called now. And so, slip of the tongue aside, I make 4 slip of the tongues every Sunday. So, like, what big deal? Beyond that, though.
But yes, going into that, honestly, it was a question we got asked a lot as students, but also whenever we're sharing the gospel with somebody, we oftentimes get asked, well, why is Christianity the religion? What makes your religion right and the other one's wrong? And so if we're going to do that, let's dive in and let's look at it. And that's the question I presented at the beginning of the message is like, okay, what makes Christianity more right? So if we look at the top 3 world religions right now, you have Christianity that kicks us off at number 1. And the stats that break that up, I think it's like 28 to 31% of the world identifies as Christians. And then
that was fascinating when I heard you say that. I did not realize it was that large.
Yeah, I know. And then you go into number 2, which
it was 33% in 2009. So it's
dipped
a little bit.
And then you go into number 2, which is Islam, and that is 25 to 27% right in there, and that's right around 2 billion people, 1.9 to 2 billion people that are Islam. And then Hinduism is the third one, which is right around the 14 to 15%.
And that's just because there's so many people in India.
Yeah.
Really, they have monopolized.
Yeah,
Hinduism.
no joke.
Yeah.
And so, but the way I framed that and the why is that important to us is because, hey, Lebanon, Missouri is a really small place, southwest Missouri. If you ever leave this part of the world, you're going to run into people who are Muslim and believe
we
in
do
Islam.
live in a bubble.
Yeah.
I joked when we moved back, even just from Jefferson City several years ago, I joked that we moved back to America. It's different right here, and it is America right here in Lebanon, Missouri. I mean, it's old school America, I guess I should say. It's like and I guess the thinking and the culture, it's like rewinding America to the 50s in regards to the mindset. That's my only way to describe it. But.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to focus in on. I said, hey, if you travel anywhere, you're probably going to run into somebody that's Muslim. And it's important for you to understand, especially if we're going to try to share the gospel with them, whenever they mention God, when they say Allah, how that is different than the God that we believe in. And it's important for us to understand those differences in that. But also, if the enemy is going to use anything as a threat against us as Christians, we need to know about it. And there's other religions that are up there rivaling Christianity now for the overall most popular or number 1 religion in the world, and Islam is number 2, and it's growing faster than any other religion, and so we have to be aware of that. And I think the reason that's important.
Do you have any understanding as to why it's growing so fast? What is drawing people to it?
Well, I think it's slightly misleading to say because in America, Mormonism is the fastest growing religion. I don't have the statistics in front of me. I would say in America, Islam probably is not as fast growing as we may think. I think that those studies are probably taking into account areas of the world where it's the only game in town.
Yeah.
So by default, it's going to have
entire population of an entire country. It's like Hinduism in India.
If the population goes up 5%, Islam goes up 5%. So I mean, it would be interesting to actually look at those studies.
Well, and that's what, like in India, if you had to fill out a form and identify what do you believe in, how scared are you to not put that you believe in Hinduism?
You have to report that with the government in India, and then when you change it, they come harass you. So it takes a huge step to leave Hinduism and move, especially to Christianity. Yeah, and I think there's like 10 trillion people that live in India. So that
so in the same part of Islam, how many people, whenever they're doing this, however they figure out however many people put Islam because they're so in that territory and they're scared to put anything else, or they are raised in it, different things like that. You're right. Can be misleading, but
even still, there's a draw.
That show.
And so, what do you think the draw is to cause people to accept that religion over another?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is in the same department as Mormons is it's work-based. And I think for us as a man, it's easy for us to grasp something that we can achieve and we can do.
Because that's how the rest of the world works, basically.
And even like us, whenever we share the gospel with somebody and they are having a hard time submitting and just letting go, the reason is like, I don't deserve it. I haven't earned it. Or how many people have you talked to say, oh, I got to make these changes before I start coming to church and doing these things? Yeah. Because it's all about what we can attain and what we can grasp. And Islam and their core beliefs, it is a work-based plus submission. It requires work from that individual, which is easier for them to potentially grasp than just grace is the reason they get to go to heaven.
Yeah, Christianity, I look at it, it's so easy, it's hard.
Yeah.
There has to be more to it than that. And I think that is a huge stumbling block for people. There's like no way. It's like the free lunch that doesn't exist, you know. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I think that's why you see. But again, why is this important to us? I go back to Jesus' words in John chapter 16. It's his last night on earth with his disciples. He's just got done explaining to them, hey, the Holy Spirit's going to come. My advocate, he's going to be here with you. But he also prepares them for whenever he's gone. And so this is what he tells them in John 16. He says, all this I have told you so that you will not fall away. They'll put you out of the synagogue. In fact, the time is coming when anyone who kills you will think they are offering a service to God. They will do such things because they have not known the Father or me. I've told you this so that when their time comes, you will remember that I warned you about them. I did not tell you this from the beginning because I was with you, but now I'm going to him who sent me. So I think all of that, why is this important to understand? Because what Jesus is telling us here is, hey, Christians, the persecution you're going to receive, and if we went into Matthew, he talks about all the different things that are going to happen before he comes back, right? And he talks about the wars, nations rising up against nations, these plagues, these earthquakes, and then he also says, like, Christians, we will be persecuted. Well, here in John, he closes in on where that persecution is going to come from. In America, where we live, Southwest Missouri, I think we always thought, oh, that's going to be secularism, that's going to be atheism, that is our biggest persecution, what's going to be. And in fact, Jesus is saying, no, it's actually going to be another religion. I would say the original context that these disciples are hearing from, they're like, oh, that's going to be the Jews.
The Pharisees,
Right, the Pharisees. And what's crazy is these Pharisees who grew up with the Old Testament law, was supposed to, quote unquote, know God more than anybody else. He is saying, you know what, they actually never knew me.
Yeah.
They built up a fake God, a false God, and they never knew the Father, and they never knew me. And in the same way, where do we see the most persecution of Christians taking place?
He even says they're the sons of the devil, too. Yeah. So he goes pretty far with who he says the Pharisees are.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of it goes back to Exodus, where God says he's a jealous God. You know, when they are worshiping a golden calf and they're doing all these things wrong, you know, he's talking to Moses, and he is a jealous God. In the same department, he is a jealous God. He doesn't like somebody else, another religion, using his name and prescribing things to him that's not of him. And you actually get it takes him off.
Yeah.
And
then taking his people away.
Absolutely. And so if we read this, okay, they're going to persecute you as if they're offering a service to God. And when Islam was started by Muhammad in 610, and they immediately started going around and killing people in the name of a political conquest, it was all out of offering a service to Allah, which is an Arabic word for God. But what Jesus is saying here is like, hey, no, they never knew me. And now today, the number one persecutor of Christians, who kills more Christians than anybody else? It's not secularism, it's not atheism.
Heart disease.
Probably poor health are probably up there.
Obesity.
Yeah. But you know what?
Didn't something surpass heart disease recently? And it was just like, whoa.
RFK is working on that with the upside down pyramid.
Yeah.
It's going great.
Upside down pyramid.
Yeah.
But no, Muslims or Islam. Now you may be listening to this and say, well, hold on a second. They're talking, and we'll get to that in a second, of who, you know.
But the truth is, Islam has killed 62,000 Christians in Nigeria alone.
Yeah.
Beheaded. Many of them.
And by the way, what's the Nigerian Christians, the thing is the mainstream media is now slowly but surely, it's getting to the point where they have no choice. They have to address it. And so,
because Donald Trump did.
Yes. Well, but
now they have to decide, are we with Trump on this, or are we against him?
Not to get political too quickly.
Yeah.
But even I was, I saw on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, where Bill Maher, who is certainly not a Christian, he made a movie against Christianity called Religulous. He is a left-wing pundit. He has his own show on, I think it's HBO, Showtime, one of those. But he literally devoted a section of his show focused on the atrocities of what is going on at the hands of Islam, Muslims, radical Muslims, that in which Christians are being killed daily. So, I mean, this is now to the point where we're having this conversation, whether you know a Muslim, you don't know a Muslim. The fact is that as Christians, they are at war with us.
Yeah. Yeah, and many of them, they're Islam nationalists. They want everybody to become Islam. They want everybody to adhere to Sharia law. And as you were tapping into, we can go ahead and start that
Their
conversation.
argument would be, well, so are you.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's where we both believe at the very core. We believe in the same component of we want people to believe what we believe. Why? Well, because we believe it's true. And because as loving people, we want you to have the truth. And so Muslims would actually say in the same way, they said, well, no, just like you believe Christianity is true, we believe Islam is true. And so, of course, we're going to try to get people to our side. That on the surface, I'm fine with. I'm fine with religious people believing their religion is true.
But when the end game, as you see leaders in Islam talk about, is to replace the Constitution with Sharia law, that is where we would disagree. Because we're not trying to replace the Constitution with the Bible.
Yeah.
And Sharia law, that comes from the Qur'an, and they base everything off of that is what they're doing. And so then that's where, well, is that what Mamdani goal is and all of that? On the surface, he is saying no, it is not, but he is against democracy, and so that I don't think he is trying to outwardly say that to replace the Constitution with Sharia law, but how do we know that's not his end game?
I mean, he's endorsed open communistic beliefs, and I mean, he doesn't hide it, and so I do think that that's problematic. But I would say that we need to break down and really determine, okay, when we say fringe Islam, we say radical Muslims, are we really describing the 0.001%? Are we describing a larger amount that maybe don't say the quiet part out loud? The Quran does talk about jihad. It talks about, the external battle.
By the way, is what Mamdani was sworn in on in New York was
the Quran. So it talks about that. How do we do jihad? What item do we use externally for jihad? Well, Muhammad writes it's with a sword, referring to infidels, unbelievers, those who do not accept Allah as the one true God. And so that's their text, and you can break that down and look at that. But the fact is whether or not the text says what it does, what we do know is we do have numbers and data on Muslims that do believe in that version of what the Quran states.
Yeah.
And I think at some point we can break that down to say, okay,
let's just jump into it. Yeah, because this podcast it's all going to just flood into one recap from Sunday into our conversation. And so there's three major groups, from my understanding, within Islam. You have the jihadists, which is what you would say is like the most extreme.
Yeah. So
and those groups consist of, that's oftentimes where you would get ISIS, Taliban, parts of Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
That's
So
where it would come from.
the first group is jihad. They are a percentage of which jihad. These are people who adhere to the Quran, adhere to the Prophet Muhammad. They wake up in the morning and their goal is death to Christianity, not figurative death, literal death. And so the 9/11 hijackers would have fallen under jihadi Muslims,
Which they believe in religious rule through force, and so they believe like literally the shedding of that innocent blood is a
with
sacrifice,
the sword, as
is
the
how
Quran
they
says.
get
So you've got
salvation.
those. The next group is Islamists, and now Islamists believe almost identically to what jihadis believe. The difference is that somebody who is a jihadi Muslim believes, okay, we are going to physically kill. An Islamist believes in the principle, but they do not believe in the action of physically killing, and so they don't strap bombs to them. But they do believe in Islamic rule. They do believe in Sharia law. They do believe in the idea that if you are not Muslim, you will bow to Muhammad. And so these are what we would call radical Muslims. And studies show in our world today, these are about 20% of Muslims. Those two, Islamists and jihadis, are 20% of Muslims in our world. And so that to me is
20% of 2 billion. 400 million?
Well, just say this: 1 in 5 Muslims. Just say this.
million.
Just say 1 in 5 Muslims. That's all you have to do. 1 in 5 Muslims. Now, if I were to tell you,
How many Muslims there are?
there's a lot, but if you could compare it, because
$2 billion?
I think we're at 400 million.
there are some Christians that believe that homosexuals should be stoned. There are some Christians that believe that, right?
I've never met one.
I would say
Really?
In Topeka, Kansas, at the Westboro Baptist Church. I would say that those
fringe.
are fringe Christians.
Yeah,
And if you say,
absolutely.
what do you mean by fringe? I would say 0.0001% of Christians believe that we should stone homosexuals, right? And there are a few fringe pastors. Stephen L. Anderson in Arizona, he is a pastor of a church. He believes that homosexuals should be killed. That is a fringe version of
And
Christianity.
you're talking like 0.01 of
0.01,
1%.
yeah.
You know,
Now,
I mean,
if I were to tell you right now, and if I showed you my studies and they checked out, if I were to tell you 1 in 5 Christians believe that homosexuals should be stoned, well, then
you'd be hearing about that.
your tune would change a little bit. You would say, oh, no, they actually do believe that, because that's a big portion of the room. So we're not talking fringe. We are talking 20%. Now,
it's going to have influence.
the final one I will share is, okay, so that's 20%. What about the other 80%? Well, in Great Britain, a big population of Muslims exist. 78% of British Muslims believe that the Danish cartoonist that drew a picture of Muhammad should be prosecuted, because Muslims believe you do not portray the image of Muhammad. Even a portrayal of Muhammad, in some areas of the world, you get your head cut off.
Yeah.
So this British cartoonist draws a depiction of Muhammad, probably not in the most flattering light, but he does it nonetheless. 78% of British Muslims believe he should have been arrested, charged, convicted of a crime for doing that.
And at least gone to jail, basically.
Yes. So if we're and I'll shut up after this, but if we're going to talk fringe, 20% believe in either bloodshed or direct overthrow of government when it comes to in the context of Islam. That's not fringe. And 8 out of 10 British Muslims, who are far more progressive than Middle Eastern Muslims, 8 out of 10 believe that you should be prosecuted for drawing a photo.
Yeah, could you imagine if 8 out of 10 Christians said you needed to go to jail if you portrayed Jesus in any bad light?
If you use the Lord's name in vain, you should go to jail, right? That would be, we would hear that and we would say, oh, well, that's a very radical fringe version of Christianity, because there may be some Christians that believe if you draw a picture of Jesus in a negative light that you should go to jail. In a democracy, that does not. That's a very abnormal view.
But I'm just the idea that, could you imagine if 80% of Christians thought you should go to jail? It's just because that's not the case.
No.
But just to put it in that perspective, that if anybody drew any kind of unflattering, or we even talked about before this episode how South Park always depicted Jesus in the boxing ring getting his butt kicked all the time, and he was this weenie wimp.
The Church of Scientology released a statement against South Park. Mormonism, I mean, they absolutely went after Joseph Smith and made fun of him. Atheism, they did a 2-part episode on atheism. South Park has made fun of every religion in the world. In the moment they released that they were going to depict Muhammad, Comedy Central, who had been taking a nap for the last 15 years, they didn't care. They wake up and they're like, oh no, and they stop. So why is that important? Well, because we hear all the time from Americans and from people that don't like Christianity, and they will tell you that Christianity is holding people back, that Christians are against freedom, all of this nonsense.
We're pretty quiet, if you ask me.
We're pretty tame in the grand scheme of things. Yes, we're against abortion. Yes, we're against men becoming. Yes, we believe in those things. But in terms of freedom, 80% of British Christians saying you should sit in jail for drawing a picture that may portray our religion in a negative light. That to me is the antithesis of freedom. So. Yeah, so those are just some statistics to sit on. When you hear people say, oh, well, that's not all Muslims, that's just the fringe. 20% is not the majority. 20% is a very big number of your religion that believes in bloodshed and overthrow of government in the name of Allah.
Yeah. And that's where, if something could have been taken out of context yesterday, it's when we talked about,
Don't say
Sunday, when I talked about on Sunday.
It's on you, buddy.
Don't let me into this.
Sunday, whenever I said, hey, the people who participated in 9/11 in our largest city in America, and now in that very city, 25 years later, the person of the same belief is now the mayor. And they could have said, oh, well, you're comparing a radical group to a practicing Muslim. You're lumping them all together. And I think what distinction I would like to make and just clarify on that is I'm not saying that they are all the same. I think some of the Muslims, probably the foreign exchange students that you knew,
Very peaceful.
very peaceful. Some of the nicest people that you know. What I was getting at is the text that they use, their Bible, the Qur'an, they believe in the same book, right? They just apply it differently. The people of 9/11, the extremists, as you were just talking about, they believe in takeover through force, through the sword, whereas what Mamdani believes is doing it from the inside out.
Yeah.
So it may be more peaceful, but he still believes in that overthrow from the inside
So
out.
here I'm going to play devil's advocate. What about in Wichita, the killer of George Tiller, the abortion doctor that was murdered by the Christian? He uses the same text that you and I use. So how is that? Why is that different? If one Christian murders and says, "Well, no, the Bible tells me,"
Well, his basis was he was saving thousands of lives.
that was maybe his basis. But
Yeah.
do we believe in vigilantism, murder? You know,
no.
that would be the question. Or since we're already in Kansas, you Kansas people, you've got Fred
I
over
remember
here.
when that happened.
Well, the other one is, and I said I met someone who believes that homosexuals should be stoned. I mean, I went to the Westboro Baptist Church. I spent a Sunday with them. They would use the same text that we do when they go to the funerals of soldiers and say, "You are all going to hell."
Yeah.
How do we distinguish the people on the Islamic side and to say, well, they believe in the same text? There's a lot of really evil Christians that do a lot of evil because they misread our text. So the question isn't what text they use. The question is how they interpret it, because anyone can misinterpret any text, no matter what.
that happens all the time
I can
within church,
misinterpret Dr. Seuss if I misinterpret it. The question is, what does the actual interpretation say? And I think if you look at Muhammad's original writings, the question isn't, are they misinterpreting it? The question is, who is interpreting it correctly? Mm-hmm. And clearly we have a large chunk of Muslims that say, no, the peaceful ones, the ones that don't, they believe jihad is not what it is. They are actually the ones that are grossly misinterpreting what Muhammad wrote.
Yeah, because if you look at the very founding of their religion, when Muhammad founded it, I mean, again, he was born in 570 AD, so 570 years after Christ. In 610, he goes into this cave in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, goes into this cave and receives this vision or
divine revelation from an angel.
And he even attributes the angel to Gabriel.
I don't like that.
Nope. And so, but what Paul would say in Galatians as we dove in is that is actually not an angel at all. It was actually just a demon. And he received this revelation of the Qur'an.
Which wasn't after the fact. Paul says this way before any of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And in that revelation, it was revealed to Muhammad that Jesus was nothing but a prophet who was actually prophesying about the next final greatest prophet, which is Muhammad. And so, which is always mind-blowing to me, is the only person that got that revelation was Muhammad himself.
Yeah.
He went into a cave and said, "Oh, Jesus prophesied about me, so here I am. Now let me go bring it to." But
reflections of Mormonism as well.
Yeah,
Well,
in summary,
similar
though,
story.
Another interesting is that his wife Aisha was 6 years old when they got married, and they consummated it when she was 9.
What?
The Prophet Muhammad. Fact check me on that. Someone fact check me on that.
Is that even biologically possible?
Apparently it is. And Joseph Smith and Helen Mar Kimball was an early teenager whenever she was promised eternity because of Joseph and all of that. And so it's incredible how so many of these prophets that allege to speak with God are also doing pedophilia practices. And it's like, what an interesting Jaden, I'm always going to go back to Jaden. Fact check me on that. Look, how old Muhammad's wife when they got married and consummated? Because if I am wrong on that, we'll just end
he
the
actually
episode.
had 11 wives. And so,
Well, the one I'm thinking,
first.
the one I'm thinking of is I think it's you pronounced Aisha or Aisha, Aisha, I think. But anyways, if I'm wrong on that, we'll end the episode and restart.
yeah, no, but like he went into this cave and he came out and he basically made this presentation to people. Hey, I've received this divine revelation. Do you want money, women, and power? If so, follow me in what this says, and we're going to go take over.
How many men in the world is that going to speak to?
I
It's
thought
like,
you stole
yeah,
that from
actually, I
myself.
do.
Because
I
I
love
preached
that.
several months ago, and I said 99% of sin can fall under 3 things:
Yeah.
money, sex, and power. Everything, most
That's
bad
just
decisions.
serving it
But
up,
that's like,
spoon
it's
feeding.
the same playbook, different religion. I mean, Mormons, like what was Joseph Smith essentially saying?
Yeah, you will be like God. You will. Yeah.
And you get to sleep with their wives.
Yes,
money.
and you'll have as many women as you want.
Right. Right. And so
And you look at the Mormon Church now, money is a huge part of it. So money, women, power.
So in the very beginning, in the start, in the foundation of Islam, Muhammad, there's a reason. As soon as they started killing and taking over, he became a political leader in where he was. And
So did Joseph. He ran for president.
yeah, and so he became a political leader. People started following him, and it literally became hey, you become Muslim or you die.
Yeah.
You become one of us or you die. So if you're talking
Yeah.
about the very foundation of where it started and what they say they believe in, it started off with that violence. Now, again, we're not saying everybody that is Muslim now and believes in Islam now, we're not saying that they are all violent. Like
No.
you said, there are some people that are very peaceful and kind. But that foundation of what they believe and what it goes back to is
Yeah.
goes
Real
back
quick,
to that.
was I right on that, Jaden?
Age 9.
Age 9 is when they consummated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Betrothal at age 6.
Married at 6. Okay. How about that?
That
Well,
is their process.
Even also talking about the power, money, and women, it's also, again, the exact opposite of what Paul teaches all throughout his letters of do not be a lover of money, man of one wife, and the power comes from the Holy Spirit.
You say women, I actually just say sex because we're not just because women could fall into this trap as well. We're talking, the idea of sex, and that's what was used.
It's so funny, just the opposites, the stark contrast to what the gospel is or the Bible is versus these other.
Which is why you can never let anybody say, "Oh, I believe their religious pluralism," which is actually one of the most growing philosophies in America today. Is why I believe there's truth in all religions. Well, no, I mean there is direct contradiction on what these two religions actually teach.
Yeah, and why is all this important? And I go back to the message on Sunday and what I was trying to show people. Why do we need to be alert? And the heart kind of behind the message too was, hey, yeah, we need to look at how their Jesus is different than our Jesus, but also to prepare the flock of like, hey, it's starting here. Like they are trying their political conquest here because we showed a map of where Islam is most prevalent in the world. And then we kind of zoomed in and showed, hey, it is in America. Obviously, you got the Northeast, that is where it's most dominant. You have Detroit, Michigan's a hotbed, Minnesota, as we've seen. But Illinois is also growing, and it is actually one of the most prominent places in America for Muslims. And
Chicago?
And then,
That's what I was thinking.
and then right next to that is
St.
obviously
Louis.
Missouri. And
It's
so,
interesting. Why are there so many inner cities that seem that they're so willing to adopt? Or is it that Muslims are moving into the inner city? And with all due respect, most inner cities in our country are not thriving.
It does follow a certain demographic. So
It's interesting.
yeah.
but
But we don't see it in rural. I mean, you don't.
Right.
It's not. I mean, someone asked me yesterday. This is actually a funny joke. Someone's like, "Well, do we even have a mosque near?" I said, "Yeah, the Shrine Mosque in Springfield, which is where they have concerts and stuff like that." I said, "Beyond that, I think the closest is Kansas City, or I think St. Louis has one, but
Yeah.
you don't find them in rural parts of the
But
world."
that's where you were talking about Illinois being pretty big. That I immediately thought of St. Louis as kind of a gateway in to Missouri, and even I guess Kansas City. It's the bigger cities that seem to, but you also have a different demographic. You have a much broader, more diverse demographic
And they
in
would
the
say
larger
that that's
cities.
a good thing, that you
and
want as
so-
much diversity as possible, and
Yeah.
diversity can be a good thing. Diversity can also include, melting pots are great until certain ideas enter the melting pot that actually are potentially destructive in an industrialized nation. And we've seen that in other parts of the world where the population of Islam increases and other parts of longevity of life, all of those things will then gradually decrease because it's a bad philosophy. It's a bad, and I don't say that in a xenophobic sense. I know that can be an easy route. As Christians, we can look at theology, as you said yesterday, and I mean I saw some people kind of, whoa. You said I love Muslims, I hate Islam, and I think that is kind of where we got to land on this.
yeah, and that's where this is so important for us because as you encounter, our goal is we want to make heaven crowded. It's the name of this podcast. And I think as Christians, my pushback to Christians in this all is you have a lot of Christians that want to go and they spread a lot of hate, especially when it comes to Muslims, of like, hey, how wrong and all these different things. Well, we can love them and hate their religion. And I think that's where it comes back to. And in order to do that, you have to recognize the true enemy behind it. And you have to recognize that Satan is the one pulling the strings behind the curtain. And whenever you're able to recognize that, you're like, okay, I can love that person, but hate what their current beliefs are in Islam.
Yeah.
Because if you don't love them, you're never going to come to the point of humbling yourself to share the gospel with him.
But it's a different type of, hey, they hate what we believe, and in many cases will kill because of that hatred. We hate what they believe, and in response, we want to love them by presenting the actual correct worldview. Yeah. That's the difference in hate. Mm-hmm. If I hate you and kill you, that's unjustified hatred. Mm-hmm. If I hate what you believe, but I want to see change in your life because I care about your eternity, those are two very, very different.
I want you to understand truth.
It's kind of like Jesus flipping over a table versus, say, me getting angry and flipping over a table.
Paul says our struggle is not against flesh and blood. It is the principalities behind it that we're at war with, are the evil that is behind the untruth, I guess you could say. So.
And so that's where I went in yesterday. I was talking about, hey, there are multiple Islamic leaders have talked about the goal of political conquest, especially in America, and how that there will be Muslim leaders in the major cities, and eventually there's going to be a Muslim president.
Doesn't take long.
No, and as you go and you find these videos and look at what they're saying, you can see that the start of that taking place. 235 elected officials across the United States, the way we talk right now, 3 in the House of Representatives, and then, of course, you have the mayor of the largest city in the United States.
Yeah, and I think that you could potentially get pushback for making a connection between Mamdani and 9/11 of what happened on September 11th.
But I think we just made it clear, like, yes, there is extremists, and then there is those that are peaceful. They have the same goal of political conquest in mind. The extremists believe it happens through the sword, through killing people. The other ones, like Mamdani, believe it can happen from the inside out.
Because extremist doesn't mean fringe. Like that we use those as synonyms to say, well, they're just Muslim extremists. No, we agree. Like, we're not going to disagree on that. The question is extremism a fringe view within the Islamic culture? In America, yes. People wanting to murder in the name of Allah in the United States, I would say, is probably where we could probably argue is fringe. If you go to Saudi Arabia or Azerbaijan or Iran, the view peaceful Islam is now the fringe, and so you have to look at it from a broad scale and realize that yes, in our own backyard we probably are discussing fringe, but there's a reason why. There's a reason why in the Hamburg cell, in Al Qaeda, and all of that stuff that happened prior to 2001. There's a reason why they chose New York City, because they knew that New York City was the representation of the American dream. That New York City, the World Trade Center, everything through the world flowed through New York City. They realized what New York City meant in the world's eyes of the United States of America. And so the idea that that same city that radical Muslims saw as the perfect target is now being run not just by a Muslim, but a Muslim that adheres to communistic principles. He's an avowed social. I mean, he believes everything that I would argue the founding of this country was vehemently against. He is now radically pushing it. He got voted in swiftly. I mean, there wasn't a recount. I mean, he won. What does that say about the culture war that's happening right now?
Well, and just even thinking back to that whole election process, what the predominant conversation was about is that he was a socialist, and now I'd say, oh, by the way, he's also Islam. Or Muslim,
exactly. Yes.
It was all about he's a socialist. He's got communist tendencies. Is always that was the main concern.
in a political world, and we learned even as in the conservative movement, Mitt Romney was a devout Mormon, and I mean I remember. People saying, well, we're not electing a pastor in chief. We just care about his political principles. Same thing with Donald Trump. Well, is he a Christian? Is he not? He has said things that would make you think he's not a believer. Yeah, we're not electing a pastor in chief. And so we've kind of been programmed to tell ourselves, well, the idea of their religious belief, as long as the political principles are okay, then who cares where they go to church?
I've heard several people with Mitt Romney, he believes in the same Jesus. And just kind of rationalize it to make it okay in their mind for some reason. You're like, it's still not.
But even with Trump, is there's certain people, and again, I don't want to speculate. That's his salvation is between him and the Lord. But you talk to a lot of devout Christians that say, well, even if he's not a Christian, even if he is just making all that up, his policy is worth getting him elected, regardless of what he believes in about God. So I think both sides, conservatives and liberals, can fall into that idea of, religious view, wherever they go to church on Sunday, I don't care. As long as they vote how I want them to vote, then I'll vote for them.
When you can even when you hear even like Trump at the National Day of Prayer recently, he was talking about how he's going to make May 17th this National Day of Prayer and dedicating to prayer and to seeking God's wisdom. The next question is, okay, then who is God to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're saying God, and you're saying the right things, but who is God to you?
We talked about that last week.
And so you have to kind of define some terms. It's
Yeah.
even like when we were talking about how you hear some people pray and they just say God, and then in your name, well, who is that?
Yeah.
What do you mean by all that?
Whose name?
Let's define.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of lowercase g gods.
Because Muslims pray in a name as well. I mean, and we all pray in a name.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I think you got to be careful. And that's where the big part of the sermon came into is let's compare. You talked about Muslims, they're Allah. Many believe, it's the same God. They're just using the Arabic word Allah to describe God. And it's like, no, actually not. Because when you ask them that question of, well, who do you believe that God is? Then they start describing it, and you start learning, it's actually a very different God than the one I believe. Mm-hmm. And I use the example of like, it's somebody come up to me and say, hey, I am married to your wife. And I'd be like, what? And then they're like, yeah, I'm married to an Emily Winfrey. And then they start describing her as 6'5", black hair, brown eyes. And I'm like, we're not married to the same wife at all. They may have the same name, but it's a different wife. And then in the same department of talking about God, when they say, hey, we serve the same God, we believe in the same God, we call him Allah through the Arabic word. It's like, no, describe him. And they don't believe he's triune. They don't believe, what did I say?
You just keep saying Arabic, and I think it's Arabic. I've never heard it said Arabic. I was going to bring it up after the pod. I don't think it is. I mean, you made fun of me for saying nativity scene.
Yeah. Whatever.
Arabic. I've never heard that. Listen, there may be some people that say Arabic. I don't know. I've never. I'd say the tomato. Who says tomato?
Nobody.
Anyways, as you were saying, they don't believe in the triune God.
They
do not believe Jesus is the Son of God.
Correct. And so as they start describing who God is, you realize it's a very different God.
Yeah. And the idea of they say, I have talked, one of the 4 Muslims I met, we had this conversation of, we revere Jesus. We believe Jesus was a prophet. Mm-hmm. We believe, and really everything that they say about Jesus, many atheists will say the same thing. Yeah. We love the teachings of Jesus. Jesus was a great guy. All of these great things, which is actually potentially more dangerous than just saying, I dismiss him entirely. Because you can fool people into believing, Muslims revere Christ. I revere Christ. Therefore, there's no, it's harmonious. They both fall into the same thing.
But it is fascinating where there is a same father Abraham.
Yep.
In regards to tracking it back to Ishmael.
Yep.
Which then would have a similar. Abraham is the same God. Yep. We're just on the other side with Isaac, but help make the connection with regards to when Muhammad discovered or was given this revelation to how does he track back to the Ishmael side in some way? Because there's a 600 year or plus or no much longer than that, thousands of years leap from Ishmael to Muhammad.
Yeah.
What was going on in between all that?
I mean, so I don't know. There's just, I get where they can claim that we're from the same, quote, God.
Yeah. And that's where, going back to Abraham, they believe.
That's like saying motor oil and ranch dressing comes from the same department or from the same grocery.
There could be some seed oil in there that could be used as motor oil.
Yes, I've been to Walmart. The motor oil is not very far from the ranch dressing. But don't get those two mixed up, because
wasn't seed oil originally used for lubricants and engines?
That's
and I'm sure there's a seed oil in ranch
potential.
dressing.
But in debate, what we call the genetic fallacy, which is to say the origin of a belief does not confirm that belief, nor does it condemn that belief. And so, atheists will do this all the time with Christianity to say, well, if you live in this part of the world, you're more prone to believe in this. If you live in America, you're more prone. That's the genetic fallacy, because you're saying the origin of the belief either validates or invalidates the belief itself. And actually, the origin of a belief is not a truth claim. It doesn't make any claim of truth on whether it's valid or not. I could create a religion right now and do my best to tie it back to Ishmael. So that would be a genetic fallacy that, yes, just because they both fall under an Abrahamic religion, it actually doesn't say anything at all whether one is true and one is false. That's the genetic fallacy.
Yeah, and I would have to do some research to see how he draws that line. But the bottom line is they believe that the covenant blessing was passed down through Ishmael instead of Isaac. And so they believe that he was the first since he was the first they say he's the first legitimate son, and that's why the covenant blessing would pass down to him. And then through that,
pretty much got the boot.
yeah, right. And so, I mean, obviously Christianity, we go through the Isaac side, and we have that traced all the way back. But then they go through Ishmael's side. They believe Jesus was a real person, but they reduce him. And if we're going to talk about the differences, their Jesus from our Jesus, they believe Jesus was nothing but a prophet.
Yeah, not the Son of God.
Not the Son of God.
Yeah.
Salvation cannot be found through him, but he was reduced down, and he's highly respected alongside Abraham, Moses, and the others, and he's honored and affirmed as a true messenger from God, but he is not unique among any of the prophets.
So when Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, the only way to the Father is through me, how do Muslims interpret that would be my question. Like, what is Jesus talking about?
Yeah.
He's clearly more than a prophet.
So,
his words did not allow him to be merely a prophet.
So as we know that, like, the Joseph Smith translation, they change up, 3,000 things in the Bible or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, their version of the King James Bible.
But they see Jesus through the lens of the Book of Mormon instead of just through the New Testament. And so am I right about that?
Well, so when Mormons,
Yeah.
Mormons would believe the Bible to be the Word of God as far as it's translated correctly. What Mormons would do is they would just play a bad game of exegesis and go in and say, well, this is actually what Jesus meant. They would basically try to change the words. Now, Joseph did change some portions of the translation himself, but that was very minuscule.
So maybe Muslim different in that way, but they view Jesus through the lens of the Quran instead of looking at the New Testament.
The problem is that 99% of the documents we have on Jesus are the New Testament. The New Testament isn't just a half of a book.
Yeah.
It is historical records put together into one testament. And so for them to say we believe in Jesus, we just believe in the Quran version. Well, where did the Quran version get Jesus? It has to go back to the New Testament, right?
There's
So
only one source of telling who Jesus was.
But that's how when they rewrite it in the Quran, and then they read these teachings and the things of Jesus in the New Testament, what parts do they omit, different things like that, I'm not for sure. But I just know, like, the lens they see Jesus through in the New Testament is through the
So
Quran.
chances are Muhammad read the New Testament, dismissed it, and then wrote his own version of Jesus.
Yeah, so actually, if you go back to Muhammad's life, and this was part I didn't have time to go into, is there was like a religious thing going on around his world. You know, you had some
similar to
just
Joseph
like Joseph
Smith.
Smith.
So, and he was kind of trying to discover it on his own and didn't.
Identical.
Yeah, and so, like, as there was all those different religious things going on, obviously that's when he goes into this cave. But there was also a lot of political pressure going on, and that's where you get him coming out of the cave of essentially
Joseph Smith go into a cave.
No, he went into a house.
Oh,
and
house,
Had the
okay.
hat. Yeah,
Never
but
mind.
still, it is eerie how those are the exact same. Joseph Smith's in upstate New York. He's bouncing from revival to revival.
Yeah.
Muhammad is kind of doing the same thing.
there was
in his
different
own world.
religious influences going on.
Yeah.
Yes.
around him, and so
And
but
he
that's
saw it as an opportunity to say, "Oh wow, these religious people are living the life."
But where Joseph
like Joseph.
Smith took it pen to paper and started writing the Book of Mormon, we don't get the Quran until later on in Muhammad's life.
Yeah.
And
He
so
did not write
So
the
what
Quran,
what people
right?
now are like kind of going back to is he was probably adding on to these teachings as he was going on. So he didn't come out of the cave with everything. It was over like a 10 to 15 year span, and it wasn't until he passed away that they then wrote down his teachings in the Book of Quran.
Oh, and by the way, I have another one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me add to
and,
this
and so
now.
that's
Is he making it up as
But
he
even
goes along?
like
I mean,
it's so crazy, and even some of the ones we don't talk about, like Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, it's the same concept. I mean, when he created this religion of Scientology, all of these false religions basically play the same playbook every single time. It's crazy.
yeah.
so. But the thing is, like, we believe Jesus is a prophet.
No,
We believe he was, but we don't reduce him down to.
we do
just
not believe he is merely a
Correct.
prophet.
Yeah, and
Because
that's
what is your definition of prophet? A definition of prophet is someone. I mean, when we read about prophets, and of course you get the word prophecy from prophet. These are people that are receiving divine firsthand connection with God
Yeah.
to be able to then to be able to.
So like in
either-
Isaiah.
Yes.
Yeah.
A
They are
direct-
delivering a message from God,
Yes.
where Jesus, he never wrote anything.
Yep.
So that's another big difference. The story of Jesus is written by people who experienced
Other people,
him,
yeah.
not him himself.
They would say he was a spoken prophet, obviously not a written prophet.
correct.
Okay.
Well,
That's just what.
well, because he was bringing the message of salvation, and
Yeah.
so like you can talk about that. He talked about the end times and Revelation, but they reduce his role merely to just a prophet.
Because Jesus did speak prophecy. There's no doubt about
Oh,
that.
yeah.
It was his prophecy. And so
his
he was a
return.
prophet to the Father, and he was one with the Father, which is why the triune God is so important in
His
Trinitarian
prophecy
theology.
is like, hey, this is when I'm coming back.
Yes. I mean, so,
So
I
be on the
guess
watch.
it was definitionally prophecy. But again, that's why the Trinity is important. Muslims would see the Trinity as the idea of a Trinity as blasphemy.
Correct.
And punishable by death.
Yeah, that's what they take away him being the Son of God. They take away him being part of the Trinity, and so they take away any divinity of
Now,
Jesus from it.
I think I saw they do give him the label Messiah. Did I see that, or am I mistaken on that? Have you seen that?
I do not know off the top of my head. I do not.
And it
remember.
confused me. It's like, why? How could you give him the title of Messiah? Because that's the coming of God, basically.
Right.
I mean, so
Yeah, so I hate this is
And maybe I
a
missed the word
rare
do not
a
call
rare
him
Google
Messiah.
search by Roger, but it's easier. Jaden has been unimpressive on his time. It takes him a little bit long. So yes, Muslims absolutely believe Jesus, called Isa in Arabic or Arabic, as Luke would say, is the Messiah, and this title is mentioned multiple times in the Quran. However, Islam defines the Messiah's role differently than Christianity, viewing
Okay.
him as a revered prophet and a messenger of God, not as divine, the Son of God, and certainly not a part of any Trinity.
Yep.
So that is there. If you
so
change,
not
if
what
you,
the Bible
and
defines
that's-
as a Messiah.
But if that's going back to debate, if you are allowed to change the meaning of words,
terms, yeah.
you can be anything you want to
Yeah.
be, right? I mean, and so
No
that's the
kidding.
idea of, of course I believe Jesus is Lord. Now, granted, you believe Lord to be God. We believe Lord to be a respected teacher.
Yeah.
Okay, well now you've completely changed.
So
it.
the question is, why would Muhammad phrase it that way? Why would he? Why would what we would believe a demon teach Muhammad to do it in such a way like that? Well, because then Muhammad could have the same power that Jesus
It's
had.
exactly why, because that's a question that I've gotten when I speak about Mormonism. Well, why did Joseph leave in the parts about why didn't he just start from scratch and do his own thing? Because Joseph needed to get a foot in the door.
Yeah.
And he knew if they give me an inch, then I'll be able to take a mile.
it's close enough to be believable.
Yes, and so that's exactly why they do that.
Yeah.
That's why Jehovah's Witnesses use Jesus. I mean, it is an easy common ground.
Yep.
Oh, of course, we believe Jesus is a prophet. We revere Jesus. Oh, okay, great. Versus, oh no, we don't believe Jesus at all.
We're
We
a
think-
lot more alike than you realize.
I think it goes back to your podcast on when we talked about the historical Jesus, is because you can't deny the historical Jesus, that there is one. But if they can redefine him in a different way, then that's what they have to land
He gets
on.
to be their mascot.
Because they can't take him away completely. So yeah, they reduce him down to prophet, number one. Number two, the Muslim Jesus, they say he was actually born of Virgin Mary. So this one was very,
That's kind of fascinating.
yeah, to me as well. They affirm the virgin birth of Jesus. Mary is honored, and Jesus' birth is viewed as a miracle that demonstrates God's power and ability, not anything about Jesus' divinity.
So
Again, they're
how
just
did-
redefining terms. That's
How
what they're
did
doing.
how would Mary get pregnant? I'm just like, how is that even possible?
Well, they believe that prophets, and again, a little bit of this I'm speculating, but my assumption would be they believe prophets could still be a part of supernatural experiences, and so being a prophet was enough to.
Yeah, but was there ever another prophet in the known
great question.
history of man
According to
that
them, I
was
don't know.
born without a dad having
But
to be
why?
involved?
But then my question would be, why, if he was merely a prophet, would God require him to be born of a virgin? And how do you explain all of the Old Testament prophecies
Yeah.
that speak
Yeah.
of? I mean, look at Isaiah 53. How do
And
you
then how they
explain that away?
connect that too.
Yeah, that's a great question. I
Yeah,
have no clue.
and that's what they are focusing the virgin birth on. Oh, what's awesome about this was what Allah's ability is, and then but it does not bring God's presence. So like, because our big part about the virgin birth is where he says he
Well, that
will
was
be
an-
called
that would've-
Emmanuel,
Yeah.
God with
With
us.
us, yeah.
They no, it is not that.
The problem is, if God made that decision, and now 30% of the world identifies as Christian, it's like, man, you just created your own religion that now has gone over Islam by this virgin birth and who Jesus was. Like, if Jesus was not God, you think God would have intervened at some point to distinguish that fact. And obviously the early church grew in a way that
Yeah.
historians can't explain outside of a resurrection. Yeah, that's fascinating.
So when they talk, so it's important to understand. So if you're in a conversation with somebody who's Islam or is Muslim, and they start saying, "Oh, yeah, we believe in Jesus as well," just know theirs is just a prophet. There was a virgin birth, but it does not mean that God was with us. The third thing they believe about Jesus is that he was a miracle worker, and he performed miracles. They believe that Jesus healed the sick, raised the dead, and performed miracles, but only because God allowed it. not because he had the Holy Spirit, not because any part of him was divine. He has no inherent authority. He has no divine power of his own. Therefore, Jesus is reduced down just to an instrument of God's power, not a source of it.
So, as we hopefully now you have a little bit more of an understanding of Islam. I know I do, just through talking it out loud. Again, this is not one that we tackle every day, but I think we've described the tension well enough to explain why this is important. As we kind of put all that together and put a bow on it, and we start to wrap up.
Well, go ahead, but I'm gonna wait to hear where you're going with that.
Well, I'm
not sure.
Gonna close unless.
Oh, okay.
Well, the final 2 points, real quick, is so that's the third. They believe he was just a miracle worker. The fourth is they don't believe Jesus was crucified, and therefore there was no resurrection. So they actually do not believe. Islam teaches that Jesus was not crucified. It only appeared so. There was no cross. There was no sacrifice, no forgiveness, no resurrection. They actually believe that he was just called up into heaven, kind of like the prophet Elijah. So for us, obviously, if you remove the cross, you remove the resurrection, you remove Christianity.
You might as well just throw the Bible in the trash.
Yeah.
Mormons don't like the cross either. So
Yeah. And then finally, the last one is
Yes, please throw the truth in the trash. You know, I mean,
the big part. And this one we've already touched on. Number 5, Jesus is not the Son of God or divine in any sense. They strongly deny that Jesus is the Son of God. And obviously they do not believe in the Trinity. And Jesus is never worshipped in Islam. So
no, you don't worship prophets.
Yeah.
You don't worship Elijah.
yeah.
yeah, so he's honored. So Muslim Jesus is honored, but he's never exalted as Lord. So those are why was this important to talk about? Number 1, because it's becoming more prevalent in the United States, and we've seen that take place. Just know, the persecution that's going to happen, it's going to come from another religion. Right now, that religion that's doing that to Christians more than anybody else is Islam. They are now trying to take over politically in the United States. You see that take place. And so part of this, the whole heartbeat behind it, was, yes, we have to understand who we believe Jesus is, but we also understand who Islam believes Jesus is so we can reach them, hopefully, but also to help the flock be aware so we're not surprised as they continue their political conquest and trying to take over from the inside out.
Yeah, and that was going to be what is our application with this? Because
That's what I was going to
it's going to go way beyond just hey, FYI. It's just good to know kind of stuff. It helps you see just the world, have a better lens to understand how things are progressing. And I keep going back to Jesus in all of that discourse. He says, you will know.
Well, and there
will be signs.
I know pastors aren't allowed to be political and all that jazz. I will say, as Christians, knowing this information and what is going on, at least in parts of our country, I mean, New York City, pretty big part of our country, Minnesota, now Chicago, going potentially into St. Louis. We're now just a couple hours on I-44 to where this is happening. This is why I think Christians need to be politically vigilant. This is why there are a lot of Christians that are on the sidelines and say, well, we don't get involved in politics. We don't focus on that. Yeah. No, we need to get involved. We need good biblical candidates that are willing to run for office. I firmly believe that. We also need good biblical Christians who are willing to get up and vote and speak out against what is going on silently in parts of our country, but I think now is actually left the world of silence is now happening in your face, as we've seen in New York and in Minnesota, stuff like that. Yeah. So I think we need to be vigilant when it comes to
and a good pastor to listen to, Martin Sadra. He's a pastor in Australia. Martin Sadra, S-E-D-R-A.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah.
He's a pastor in Australia. He grew up in the Middle East, and he got to witness it and experience it firsthand. And talking about Muslims. And so he is a good one to listen to, and he's probably in the Christian circle, he has the lampstand into that Islam community the most and provides insight to Christians in a way. So if you're looking for somebody to listen to, he might be a good one to
that guy is I saw a message he preached on homosexuality, and I'm like, bro, that guy probably has some good security at his church because he was not holding punches. He's like, this is it. So, but yeah, he's a good one.
Well, but to your point on the politics side of it, we look at New York and Mamdani is the mayor. New York is so big, you think of that as almost like a governor. I mean, it's such a big responsibility. It is still just a mayor of a city. And the local politics have much more direct influence on your daily life than any other politics. And it's the least engagement of the populace. They could care less of, how many people show up to go and vote for their city councilman or their mayor versus a general election? So you really do have to be aware and understand who you are electing, and especially on the local side of things, because it will affect your life tremendously.
This was, I thought I'd saw this. I had to Google it real quick. It's February 5th, 2026. Was that last week? This is New York Times, not known for being conservative Christian. New York Times. Muslims move to assert political power in New York City. That is last week from the New York Times. I mean, you could Google it right now. They're saying the quiet part out loud.
Out loud
We're
now.
to that point.
Yeah, they're not afraid.
Yeah.
So does
They
that
can.
make it easy to apply? Like, does that? I'll tell you this. Like, just I don't know if it's such a new topic, but preaching it and looking around, people were so attentive to.
Yeah, they
to
were
what was
locked
going
in.
on. Yeah.
Like I
Well,
said to you earlier, there were points where you could hear a pin drop
Yep.
at times in what you were talking about. So it was good stuff. Fascinating.
Very good. All righty. Well,
What's next?
We will conclude there. Next week, we've kind of given the portrayal of Jesus in different worldviews. We've looked at the Mormon Jesus, the Muslim Jesus, the American Jesus. Now we're going to start to go into the biblical Jesus. And so starting on Sunday, we will be diving into Mark's Jesus. How does Mark portray Jesus in the gospel? And of course, Peter, as Peter is sharing all of this that had occurred, and discipleship, it's a huge part of that. And so we will dive into the biblical Jesus and why that Jesus is drastically different than some of these other versions that we have already talked
and
about.
so but to tease next week's podcast episode, what we're going to be talking about is the Catholic Jesus.
Catholic
And
Jesus.
so we're going to be talking about Mark's Jesus and then talking about the Catholic Jesus.
Yeah, so that'll be the first podcast episode where basically here's what we talked about on Sunday, and then we will go
Hard shift. Now
very
let's talk about-
different direction on that. And so so we'll do that next week. If you have Catholic friends, family members, or you yourself are potentially a Catholic, then next week will definitely be an episode you want to tune into. But until then, we will be back Sunday morning, 9 a.m., 10:30, as always, for week 5 of Rediscovering Jesus. We can't wait to see you on Sunday. And until then, have a great week. And as always, make heaven crowded.